Hey folks, what's up? Welcome to this video about testing user interactions with React Testing Library. So in this video, we will focus on two kind of user events, which are onClick and onChange events, which are the most common two events, at least for regular applications, I'd say. So that's what we're going to test. And what I did is I created a very simple application. You can find the code down in the description. I have it right here on the right side as well. And what it simply does, it has an input field. And if I change or I put a value in there, it simulates that we send money to a user. When I click send, it'll take some time, and then the amount will be updated correctly. So now if I deduct 100 or send 100, you'll see 100 will be pulled off our account balance. So just a quick overview of the code itself. We have two use state hooks, one with the account balance, one with the transfer amount, which is the value we enter right here. And then we have an onSubmit event with a timeout of 2 seconds. So that's why you have that delay before it updates the account balance. So it, or you could say, maybe mimics a request to a server. And yeah, here we simply have the header, the p tag with our account balance, and then our form with an input field and a button of type submit. Right? So that's simply it. So now let's imagine we want to write a test for this feature. And like you've seen in the previous videos, we always want to test as close as possible to how a real user would use our application. So that's pretty much what we just did, right? We entered a value right here and we submitted the form. And you can do that by either pressing enter or clicking the send button because it's wrapped in the form tags. So let's write a test for that. So I will go to my files and I will create a new file called app.test.js. And first of all, I want to describe the test. So I will say test if, well, let's use a value of $500 US. So if 500 is sent, then the account balance is updated. And of course, right here, we want the account balance to be correctly updated, but I think everyone will understand that that is what we aim for in this test. And then the first thing we want to do is our act. So we want to render our app component. So I will say render. And as you can see right here, we can import that from the React testing library. And we want to render our app, which we will also import right here. So the next thing we want to do is simulate the user typing a value right here and also sending or clicking the send button. So I will import user event from the React testing library, and then I will say type. You see we have a lot of options right here: hover, paste, click. But in this case, we want to change something within that input field. So we will type something in there. And now we want to select, as you can see right here, we want to pass that target element. And for that, we can use the testing playground extension we downloaded. So if I click right here and I hover over the input field, or actually click, then you will see it give us a suggested query, and it says get by role spin button. And it says right here, awesome, this is great already, but you could still make the query a bit more specific by adding the name option. This would require to add some markup though, as your element isn't named properly. And this is something I really like to emphasize, because if we, well, in React testing library, there is, in the docs, you can find that there is a suggested or recommended priority of targeting elements in your application. And the most common queries you will use are get by role, which is where we try to find a role, for example, a button with a certain name. Get by label text, which is, well, sometimes used for forms, but you will see in this example, we don't need that, and we can use get by role, which is even better. And get by text, and there it says outside of forms, text content is the main way users find elements. And think about, we will also do that in this example, but think about when we want to, for example, target this element. This is, if we go back to our HTML, this is just a paragraph tag, right? It doesn't have a role, like it's not a button, it's not an input field, it's simply a piece of text. So that's why we then have to use the get by text query. But let's improve our query as suggested right here. And if you've done or watched the videos before where we created forms, you will see that there's something wrong right here, because we only have an input field, but we do not have a label attached to it. And that is always a good practice to have in place, right? So I will say HTML4 transfer amount, and I will call that label transfer amount right here. And then we want to bind that label with our input through something like an ID. Oops. There we go. So now when I save it, we have our label in place. And now when I click on the input element again, you will see it says this is great, ship it. And now we have the get by role query we can use. So that's actually what we are going to use. So I will copy this and I will paste it right inside here. And we will also need to import the screen from React Testing Library, like so. And then the next thing we want to pass to the to this function is a string, which is the amount being entered in our case. So that will be 500. And then the next thing we want to do is we want to click on that send button. So I will say user event dot click, and then we grab our selector from Testing Playground again, click on the button, and we'll get the query. Again, this is a great query because it uses the get by role. We'll copy it, paste it in here, and now this should simulate having the user to enter 500 right here and clicking on send. And we can verify this by actually checking screen.debug. And what this will do is will actually console log the current state of our screen at that moment. So when I save this and I open up a new terminal, I can say right here npm test. And this will then run our tests, or test, because we only have one now. You will see that the test is passed, and that's because we have not made an assertion yet, so nothing could have gone wrong, so to speak. And you'll see right here we got a console log. So this is essentially showing the current content on the page, right? So we have our account balance, we have our send money to, we have our input field. Now you see that the input field has a value of 500, and that's because we actually we passed a string in here, but that's not really a problem. But you will see that the current account balance is not updated yet, and you will find out in a minute why that is. So that's a way to check the current state of our screen, which I'd like to show you. So let's actually make our assertion right here, right? So if everything should go right, if we you know, transfer $500, then the current account balance should be $4,500. So I could say expect, and then I want to select this right here, get by text, with our current account balance of 4,500. And now you will see that when I hover over this, it will say expect must have a corresponding matcher call. And we actually want to say right here, because we want to test if this piece of text is showing up in our screen, right? On our screen. So I will say to be in the document. So that's what we're testing for. Now, if I save this, it will rerun our test, and you will see that now it will fill. Because what it says right here, it says it was unable to find an element with text current account balance 4,500. And then if we take a look right here, it will indeed show that the current account balance is 5,000. So now you might wonder, why is that the case? Because if we do it right here, it does work, right? We have 4,500 showing up. But the reason for that is we now immediately query for that piece of text right here, right? So after these user events, so the type and the click event, are fired off, it immediately checks for the current account balance. But you notice that it takes a bit of time before this value is changed, because we have the set timeout of 2 seconds right here. So to prevent this from happening, and this will happen often in real applications as well, where you, for example, send make a request to a server and then update the value once you get a successful response, that will take some time. So what we can actually do is we can ask React Testing Library to wait for exactly 1 second, 1,000 milliseconds, before this tag show up. And in order to do that, we have to make this function asynchronous. And then right here, we want to say await. But you will see, if I hover over await, it will say await has no effect on the type of this expression. And that's because we are querying by get by text. But whenever we want to await for something, we have to use find by text, right? And the same would go for example, get by row. If you want to await before that button actually shows up, you want to say find by row. So this will now cause React Testing Library to wait 1 second before it executes this expect statement. But now when I save it, you will see that it still fills, because imagine what I said, it waits for 1 second. And in our application, we wait for 2 seconds. So that's why it can't find the current account balance with a value of 4,500. So if you want to wait a little bit longer than that, you can go right here into that find by text function. And then right here, I want to pass for like an empty object. And then in here, I can say timeout. And we could say, let's wait for example 3 seconds, so 3,000 milliseconds. And now when I save it, you will see that our test will succeed, because it can take a while. Of course, there you go. If 500 is sent, the account balance is updated, the test passed. So, generally speaking, if you have to wait like 2 or like more than 1,000 milliseconds before your the things are going to show up, you could say, that's a problem in and of itself, because that would mean that your app is pretty slow, right? So generally speaking, you want to avoid this, but if you need to, you can use it. But let's make this a little bit more realistic, right? So let's say the call takes, I don't know, like 200 milliseconds. So now when I save it, you will see that our test will still pass. And that's because we are using that async await with the find by text keyword. Now, the last thing I'd like to show you is how to query for things that should not be on the page. However, you probably won't do this very often, and in this example, you shouldn't usually do it at all. But let's say we also want to check, make sure that this doesn't show, there's no 5,000 being shown anymore. Then I could say right here 5,000, and instead of saying get by or find by, you want to say query by. And now you'll see we will not use the or have to use the await keyword anymore, so we can remove that. So then instead of checking to be in the document, we want to say to not be in the document, right? And you'll see now when I save it, we have a test with 2 assertions, so it will test for 2 things, but you will see our pass will pass because also this assertion will be truthy. So keep in mind that whenever you want to grab something from your screen, you can use get by, but if it's only shown in the future, so if you have to wait for it, you will use find by. And if you want to check for something to not be existing on your page, you can use the query by, or you should actually use query by because get and find by will not work. So that was it pretty much for this part of React Testing Library. In the next video, we will take a look at how we can test props with this library. So I see you there.